What's up, guys? Welcome back to Muscle Minds with Scott Stevenson. I'm Scott McNally. All of our programming is brought to you by TrueNutrition.com. You can use our code THINK for some additional savings. High-quality supplements. Everything's third-party tested. Created by Dante Trudell, who we mention here. Basically, like almost every show, I think Dante comes up, the creator of DC Training. It's a company that you can trust anyway. Also, check out Scott Stevenson. You can find his book over at byobbcoach.com. Today, we are going back to more then versus now. We've got people are loving these things, Scott.
They're fun. I like them.
They are. I've enjoyed this too.
Makes me feel like a young whippersnapper here, We're talking about 30 years ago.
Where are we at? What are we going to hit today? I know you have your monster chart of everything. We've discussed a lot. Everything from
we can review like on the previous podcasts. The topics I think were just generally information exchange, like how do people figure things out and talk to one another.
Whoa! We did like a dozen of them. We don't have time.
Oh, I know. I'm not gonna do them again. I'm just reading them. We don't have that. Do you need a coach? How do gurus and authorities fit in? Like training focus. Like, are you training hard? Are you working on looking at reps and reserve, exercise selection, execution? These are little teasers from the thirst trap himself to try to get people to go back and listen to those. Pre-contest dieting, off-season dieting for gains. How do people do that? And now we're on the first topic for today. Food prep.
Food prep.
Is that where you're at? Yeah. Like how do you cook your food? Like, how do people go about that?
And how has that changed now versus then? Then being when you or I started or before, bodybuilding has evolved so much in the past, even decade, I think. Is food prep different now than it was a decade ago?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, it depends on the person. So one, I think we're aware there's so many different aspects of this. So the simplest is back in the day, you didn't have food prep services. There's no such thing. You just cooked your own, and like 30 years ago, there was like, you couldn't like go online and pick out your meals and have them delivered to you, nice and cold and put in your freezer and then just pull from them. You had to cook. You basically cooked all your own food. Sundays were typically reserved for, filling up the barbecue grill to cook all your protein sources so you could have them, and then you package those things up in Tupperware and then you throw them in. And like, even when I started, there was no such thing as a 6-pack bag.
No, you could get a family cooler and you could carry that around.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Funny story. I might have even mentioned before, there was a buddy of mine who, solid guy, man. He's actually a strength coach now. He was with the Cleveland Indians, not in the major leagues, but we went to school together at University of Texas at Austin. Big dude, strong guy, total bodybuilder's physique. He didn't train that way. Trained as a powerlifter, competed as a powerlifter. He actually lived like on my floor. Like he lived with me for like 6 months and didn't even want a mattress. He just slept on the floor. He put a towel down. Yeah. He felt more comfortable sleeping on a hard surface.
That's a true Spartan right there.
I think he grew up pretty impoverished and he was kind of living out of his truck for a long while. So I let him stay with me for as long as he needed before he could find a new place. But Joe had to his name was Joe Hughes. Joe had to get up. I should look Joe up. Such a good dude. And he would have to get up and go like train the athletes because he was a strength and conditioning graduate assistant, like, butt crack of dawn, 6 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
And then he was in classes all day long. And then he had to go back and work with the women athletes in the afternoon or something like that. And then he would train himself like at the end of the day. Whew. And then, like he had 12-hour days. Yeah. So he would pack a cooler.
Right.
And like it was this big giant igloo because he ate a lot. And he had his water in there, which he had to have. The thing was ginormous. Like literally it was enough for a family of 12. And it was so funny. Like we would be talking about something. And if someone didn't know everybody, like, it would say, Joe's got to do that same thing, or you should talk to Joe about that. And someone would say, like, who's Joe? And we just say, the guy who looks like he's going to the beach. And they're like, oh yeah, right. The guy with the big ass cooler. Yeah, I seen that guy. Of course, everyone knew Joe because there was Joe who was like, 210 pounds, 5%, monster.
Yeah.
And his cooler, which was almost as big as he was. All the time. So like, that's how it was. You just made cooked your own stuff. Chicken and rice was, I think chicken and rice came about in part because it's just like it's cheap and it's easy.
Yeah.
You know, you don't have to do much. But now people are much more attuned to nutritional. Like people are using all sorts of dietary supports. They're using curcumin and astaxanthin and you know fish oils, pro and prebiotics. Like there's so many other aspects to our nutrition. Trying to get those things through food sources if they can.
Yeah.
Organic is a big deal. It wasn't a big deal, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Wasn't even around really.
Even 5 years ago, it wasn't a huge deal like it is now. Like I think nowadays it wasn't as available either. Like I feel like the cost of organic foods has become a little bit more reasonable. I know that 10 years ago, maybe I just was poorer then, but it didn't feel like it was even an option.
Right. I always started eating organic foods probably around 2005, 2006, seeking those out, like reading the labels for organic and transitional fruits and vegetables.
Yeah.
And I was kind of getting into a lot of that stuff way back then. Like I would go out. There's a town outside of Tucson, and we would drive to pick our own fruit. Okay. And I would get meat from the local farmer that was, matched to organic standards. But the thing with organic with the farm is that they have to go through an approval process. And then you'll become sort of transitional for a number of years. I don't know what the standards are now. And part of that's because if you start taking up organic processing standards for fruits, vegetables, whatever you're growing, agriculture, whatever it is, there's some period of time, basically kind of a washout time. Let's say you switch from pesticides that aren't going to obviously be organic or allowed if you're going to use an organic, be approved as an organic food provider.
Yeah.
Then it's going to take some period of time there's just a half-life of those things washing out of the soil that you're using, for instance, that is, where the grass grows, that the cow eats, or that you're using for your fruits, vegetables, whatever it is that you're growing.
Yeah.
So you've got a transitional period, and then organic. So it can take like 3 to 5 years. So people start, and then eventually they get there. So that's part of it. Like, you can't just say, I'm going organic. And the next day you met the standards and they check you out and you become organic. Literally, you can't be organic because there's just some physical limitations or physical chemical limitations there.
Sure.
To actually providing the foodstuffs as organic.
Yeah, I think we are paying more attention now. And I think that even bodybuilding itself, we have a lot more like products that are focused toward bodybuilding. All of the like the sugar-free foods, the Quest bars, things have come a long way. And I think back, like Nick Weary mentions here, my first 2 preps were done based on the 6 foods that worked: boiled chicken, tuna, etc. Things are very different from that. Shout out to Dave Pulcinella too, by the way. Yeah,
Dave commented on one of my videos the other day, which was kind of cool.
That is cool.
I said I posted, yeah.
But he was like Dave Pulcinella. He was like the quintessential bodybuilder, and for people who haven't seen his films, it's hard for me to believe, but they're older now. You could say though that he did exactly what I think all of us were doing, where you just nailed it down. You found the 5 or 6 things that work, and that's all you did for 16 weeks. I don't think it's still kind of like that, but it's expanded. We've got spices now, all sorts of bodybuilding branded spices, and people I think are a little more creative than they used to be too.
Raising the Bar is the name of there's 1, 2, and 3.
I didn't mention it. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah. Just there's so much there, especially for people who are first getting into bodybuilding, like to see, how much easier it is, the things we're talking about now in terms of, finding, there's so many, if you want to eat keto, you can do that. If you want low fat stuff, there's so many, I don't know if they're necessarily better necessarily, but at least there's all sorts of flavored stuff that kind of gives you a little bit of a psychological sense of relief.
Yeah.
But the thing is and I think Dave would argue this without a doubt, is do they actually work? Do these things work better? Can you and I think there's some truth to this. If you imagine constructing your diet with nothing but highly processed diet-based foods, everything you got was designed to trick your senses into thinking you're having a chocolate sundae when in fact you're having a pure protein source or something like that.
Yeah.
Compare a diet based solely off of that, matching the macros with the diet using the 6 foods that work.
True. Yeah.
And I could totally see the 6 foods that work outperforming, the 75 foods, that you would try to take in, plus all the chemicals and everything else that might come along with those things that, I think can have an added effect over time.
I feel like
potentially
as a coach, what I end up doing is I try to give people leeway. And if things aren't working with that leeway in and those additional things in, then we start paring it back to getting closer. And the closer, if things aren't working, the closer that I get to the 6 foods that work, the better the diet works a lot of times. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's so many examples. Like some of the obvious ones are like the labeling of things like, I can't believe it's not butter, and the sprays that are supposed to have 0 calories, when a serving is like 1/2 spray, some shit like that. So you're sort of trusting by using labels that the calories and the macros are actually on. And I can't remember the exact, what the guidelines are, but there's some play in those. Like they're not necessarily, dead on 100% accurate. So if you keep eating the same rice, you buy 3 jumbo-sized bags of jasmine rice, and that's all the rice that you eat for 16 weeks straight, and you always weigh that on a scale, at 100 grams or what have you, cooked the same way, that's going to be very, very precise, and you can then grade your caloric deficit as needed to maintain the fat loss. Right. Whereas if you've got, just take the sort of a more extreme example, you've got 5 different, carbohydrate-based foods that are all supposed to be really low in fat, and, there's 10 or 20% error on those, plus the possibility that your brain is going to say, I really sure do like this fat-free muffin a lot more than, this carb bar, this protein power bar that I've been eating. Who knows? Maybe that fat-free muffin actually has 112 grams of carbs in it as opposed to the power bar, which doesn't taste quite as good. That's 95. You're preferring that in part, and that'll make a difference. That's 10,
absolutely.
15%.
We could even take it a step further. Tanya Miller had chimed in and said, downside is people who don't do their due diligence to educate themselves easily fall prey to bullshit, since there is so much to blend in with. I think I'm thinking of I may meet a new client. Let's just take a 25-year-old girl who's kind of she's got the 6-pack bag. She's living the lifestyle. She's got the popular water jug, whatever that popular water jug is on Instagram. That's what she's got. She's got the gym clothes.
5%, or was it 5%? What was Rich Piana's thing? 5%.
I think it was 5%. Dude, I knew someone who got a tattoo. His whole back of his hand said 5%.
There are a lot of people. They were doing those in Vegas. Anyway, side note.
Oh yeah. So so say you, and then she tells me your diet, and that every meal 3 I do a Lenny and Larry's protein cookie, and wait, hold on a minute, but it's protein. And it's somebody who's just this is what she sees as popular. This is what she's doing. But she's not, with that stuff wasn't available when I started, even, 15 years ago when I got serious into competing. But nowadays we do have so many, as Joe Rogan would say, there's so much fuckery in basically just our sport, in the companies that come up. You could think you're doing the right thing and easily be adding in 25 grams of fat per cookie,
Yeah. I mean, there are times when, especially when you're dieted down, I can just tell, with different grades of meat, for instance, I know there's fat in there. You can see it in the pan. You can see how it sizzles in the pan. You can see it if you, there's an old trick that Dante I know talked about, washing your beef.
Yep. Yeah.
Was one way you can do that. You can get rid of a substantial, and I actually have a citation. This has actually been documented scientifically. You can obviously get rid of some of the fat that's in your beef. You can just see, you throw some beef on, and, it's supposedly 80% or what have you. And it's that's fatty as hell, man. It's amazing that there's so much fat can actually be in that, it not just look like a big chunk of lard. And then other times, wow, that's really, there's nothing there. And on paper, per the label, you would seem to have the same thing, but you don't. So yeah, you're introducing another level of variability there when you're just jumping between pieces. And like this is another side, but the whole like marketing in large part, and this is why I do things the way I do, because it's just one of those things like just I think the way things should be is marketing in large part is trying to some extent trick you into making the decision they want you to make. It's not about giving you an open field of possibilities and educating you as the pros and cons in as objective possible fashion. It's not like, say, here's the different protein bars are on the market. And sometimes they'll use this comparison thing, but rarely do you see the disadvantages. Like how often do you see like a comparison chart where they compare us versus, the top brands, where you see like more than one thing where the top brand might beat them out on. They choose the category specifically so they're superior in every single one of them. Yeah. They never show you a disadvantage to their product, when there certainly almost always is. Sometimes, there are products that are really, really good, but so marketing is trying to trick you. Yeah. Just like Tanya was going to get, like literally it's fuckery. They're trying to mind fuck you, Jedi mind fuck you into buying their product.
And that is definitely a different now versus then. And if you were to just come into fitness, say in the last 10 years, you have to contend with that minefield as you figure out how to get in shape, as you figure out what it takes to reach your goals.
I think there's more mines, but I think there was still a minefield back then.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that literally, was part of my motivating factor, it wasn't all of it, obviously, I'd still be doing this, but when I went to get my PhD, and like one of the research lines that I wanted to have intact was examining, like literally like trying to take out the marketing bullshit that supplement companies would put out. Like that's why I studied creatine for both my master's thesis and my PhD. Part of my master's, not my actual thesis, but we went into a project and we actually did it for my master's thesis. There's 3 projects there. And because that was the main supplement. Like, does that really do anything? Like, this is being touted as this big thing. Obviously, we know, a lot more about creatine than we did 20 plus years ago. But so like Muscle Tech was the example where they would have these plots, of 640% greater gains, this kind of shit. It's like, what? And the citation would just be like the initials, and then the journal, abbreviated, and then like, volume, page numbers in year. And you look that up and it's something that was done like an in vitro study, with chicken embryos or some shit like that. And they're supplying this like humans for weight training. It's like 640% increase in myostatin inhibition, or who knows what, some crap.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this just can't stand. Like, this was like me, like being kind of wanting to be the Robin Hood way back then, because I was seeing all this shit and seeing through it eventually, having been tricked as a young teenager and before, who collected reams of Muscle Mag, Muscle and Fitness, Flex magazine. I collected all those things. I thought I had those stored away in a box because I thought one day like that would be a vital source of information from which I'd be drawing. Literally, I was like literally, because there's what else could I have known? You know,
sure.
You don't learn the science of exercise in your PE classes.
Yeah.
In high school, you don't learn it. There's no real, there's a biology class, but no one's going into like muscle physiology or anything like that. Bodybuilding is far from connected to almost anything you pick up as a student in high school or even in college, unless you go into an exercise science program, which I hadn't. So I learned by the time I was in college, like there's some bullshit here, but I had like, I probably sold those things on eBay, but I had so many magazines. So I got tricked, as well.
Yeah, I could see that. I feel like the trickery though was more in the supplements than the foods. Like there are so many food options now that you could be basing your diet off of, when at the end of the day, it's still, no matter what, the best thing is going to be the 6 foods that work, or, some variation of that.
Yeah. So there's one thing I think, just kind of a caveat to that, is that if you're aware of what you're doing, so like, let's say there's a bunch of sugar alcohols, which you have the sense kind of screw up your microbiome because your GI gets a little upset when you have those in excess. And I've done that before too, but you've got some foods or I'm going to call them foods, like some food items, let's say, that you incorporate because you are trying to sort of trick your brain into greater levels of satiety.
Yeah.
So you're trying to use that sweetness, like diet sodas are one that people will employ, or like there's all sorts of things you can add, like kind of quote unquote calorie free frostings and sweeteners and that kind of stuff. And if you use those, sort of in a very targeted way, where you're using the same thing, there's a limit to how much you can use. You're applying that knowingly because it has this very noticeable, or whether it's psychological or physiological, it's kind of a little bit of both probably, effect on your ability to stick with the diet. And you're not just falling prey to oh my God, now I want to get the sugar-free, fat-free, protein-only cookie or whatever, out of nowhere. You're not sort of kind of creating a excuse for a binge on highly processed diet foods, but you're using them strategically as you're dieting down. I think that can be a good use of those. So you can make the dieting less difficult in certain sense if you add those things in a knowledgeable way.
I agree.
But if you're just I'm fucking hungry, and you go out I'll just have 45 of these super cookies, it's
get all my protein.
Okay, right. That's not the way to do it. But so that you can leverage those diet foods to your advantage. I think.
Yeah, I agree with you totally. I am thinking of, I guess, the newer person who's still just trying to figure it out. But I agree totally. And I think further, you have to accept the hunger. And once you can,
have to want it.
Yeah. Because the trap to me, and I've talked about this, I think on other episodes, other shows, is that the trap to me is the running from the hunger. And instead of just accepting this is where I'm at and this is what I need for my goals, if you don't have that acceptance, then you're not going to ever feel comfortable. You're going to be tormented by your diet, really. And you are going to be suffering then. You're suffering at your own hand is what it comes down to. We talked about this really early on in Muscle Minds. It was a breakthrough for me, the difference between suffering and discomfort. Because I used to feel like, oh man, I'm really suffering on this diet. But no, I never suffered because I chose, to do it. But there is a difference there. And once you can accept that you're going to be hungry and you don't need something to hide from it or run from it or to fill that void, be it food or be it buying shit off of Amazon or whatever that void might be, then you're in a much better place.
That paradox has a parallel in the therapy world.
I bet.
So, you may have experienced this too. So the paradox, of course, is that the suffering is there because you're not accepting the pain.
Yep.
And once you turn that pain into a desirable outcome, it becomes you bring more pain into your life, but the suffering goes away.
Yeah.
Which is very paradoxical. That's kind of that has a Zen koan type feel to it when you just leave it like that. And the thing that's said sometimes in the therapy realm, because I did years of therapy, mainly when I was back in Arizona, but I still always I'm doing therapy all the time, basically trying to trying to figure myself out.
As we all should.
Know myself. I think so. Yeah.
Figuring ourselves out,
But one of the things there in the same way is that if you see, something that's painful, instead of shying away from it and avoiding it, go to it and go through it.
Ooh, yeah.
And that's kind of what, I adopt when I'm dieting down or even in when I'm training. It's now it's getting hard. Now let's go.
Yeah.
Now it's time. These are the reps that matter. These are the effective reps. This is the fun part. This is what all of this, thinking about the workout, planning the workout, all the food, everything's come to these last few reps. Yeah. This is where I get to actually experience what I've been striving for, which is paradoxically very, very painful. But it's exactly what I want. Absolutely. What I've chosen. It's come on, bring it on, baby. Yeah. And I think so often back to that, people could go and watch us. They want that video of Tom Platz squatting 500 pounds for 23 reps. And you remember that video where he's wearing the lime green, spandex? And, so he gets going, and you're like, the first few reps, you're like, oh man, like, I don't know how good he's going to do at this. He's probably like working out the kinks a little bit. And he gets to somewhere like around 10, 12, 13, something like that. And if you watch his face, he gets a smile. He smiles.
Yeah.
Because he's like, now's where I want to be. This is my place. Here we go. This is where I feel alive, and as live as you can possibly get. Like, everything's firing.
Yeah.
Your brain, your psyche, your spirit, you're all 100% in. It's like starting to bring tears to my eyes thinking about it.
Yeah.
Because it's just, in the Chinese medical sense, there's yin and yang energy, and this yang energy is that of movement, and it's fire, it's heat, it's drive, it's aggression, it's going into something. You're freeing that yang energy, and it feels really good to do that. It's part of, expending energy, the opposite of yin, which is during your recovery. So you have to be careful, like people who go way to one end of, the yang thing, like people who spend a week in Las Vegas and they're exhausted, or
right.
Someone gets, on methamphetamines for a long time, and they literally they drain their life energy. Yeah. You see that in their face in people who've been meth addicts. But so it's like part of that. It's like that one side of like really burning when you're in that zone. This is how I kind of see it,
Yeah.
And that video with Tom is pretty cool, because I've never asked him this, I know some people who know him, John's trained with him, but I always had the sense, like I always resonated with seeing that smile on his face, because I get the same thing, if not outwardly, then at least inwardly.
I like that. So, and I like what you're saying, because it ties it into everything with dieting and, accepting, where your situation. I think it's a good analogy. Yeah. All right,
There's
man.
Much more on that too I could go into, but time to wrap it up, I think.
I think so. I think this is a good one. Okay. I know we've got a bunch more too than versus now. So we've got a bunch more we can get to. Guys, we appreciate you tuning in. If you haven't subscribed yet, we'd love to have you along for all our shows. So, hit that. Leave us your thoughts too. What are the differences that you can recognize then versus now with our nutrition? What are the things that you find, difficult with it today? Of course, check out our sponsor, truenutrition.com. Use our code THINK to help support our programming, and check out Scott's books, BYOBBcoach.com and FortitudeTraining.net. There's a lot of good stuff in there. You can grow some freaking muscle. Scott,
there you go.
It's been a pleasure, brother. Man.
Appreciate it. Likewise.